The Petit family was living a wonderful life in the suburbs of New Britain, Connecticut. James, the father, was a man who loved his work in the insurance industry, while Jennifer was that amazing mother who took care of every detail of their home life. Their daughters, Michelle and Haley, were like two flowers in a garden. Everything was going well, and their life seemed like the perfect family story from any heartwarming movie. But was their life protected from a horrifying fate lurking just steps away? No one expected that this tranquility would be nothing but an illusion. On the night of July 23rd, no one in the family expected that their lives would change forever. Darkness covered the sky when two strangers barged into the Petit home. They entered with threats and hushed whispers, but their impact was devastating. Suddenly, a chilling silence filled the air, and the family began to breathe in a terror they had never known before. The heavy footsteps echoed in every corner of the house, and with each passing moment, fear intensified. This was the tragic beginning of events that time would never erase. After the intruders broke into the house, they took control of the entire family. They threatened them with weapons, alternating between psychological and physical abuse. James, the father, bravely tried to defend his family, but the restraints were stronger than his resistance. The whole family was trapped, and the tears in their eyes weren't enough to stop the attackers' cruel actions. Hours passed, perhaps, days in an instant seeming like an eternal punishment. It was clear that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that wouldn't end anytime soon. The attackers were not satisfied with what they had done. They had more brutal plans in mind. They began threatening the family in even more terrifying ways, making financial demands. They asked for their bank account information and money. The goal was clear. This wasn't just a robbery, but an attempt to push the family into losing everything. Moments of panic followed, and the family tried to hide their fear, but everyone knew that the story wouldn't end well. In a moment when everything turned to hell, the attackers decided to kill James, the father. The attack on James wasn't just murder, it was an insult to all of his attempts to defend his family. They beat him mercilessly, inflicted fatal wounds, and left him to bleed out. As he fell, it seemed as though life had been taken from the family in an instant. With each family member who fell, their sense of helplessness grew. The crime wasn't just murder, it was a crushing of the human spirit. Now, in the hands of the killers, the family desperately tried to find a chance to escape. The moments when they thought they might escape hell were brief. Every attempt to flee was met with overwhelming force, and every corner of the house became tighter and more suffocating. They knew that the hours they spent in fear would be crucial. Every minute that passed felt like a different end, and as escape seemed further away, despair became the only feeling that filled each one of them. Then came the most terrifying chapter in the tragedy. The attackers decided to set the house on fire, as if they wanted to make the family's death an unhealable event. Flames devoured everything in their path, and at the same time, they consumed any hope of escape. The fire wasn't just the destruction of the house. It was an attempt to obliterate all traces of the crime. In that moment, the true horror was approaching, and the family struggled to survive amidst the flames. When the investigators finally arrived, they found a scene far more tragic than they had expected. The house had been destroyed by fire, but amidst the smoke and blood, there were valuable clues. Bloodstains were scattered everywhere, and biological evidence pointed to the identity of the killers. Slowly, the investigators began to piece together the scattered pieces of the puzzle. They had a sense that justice might be near, but they knew the road ahead would still be long. In the days following the crime, the investigators worked tirelessly to understand what had happened. Through the evidence they gathered, They began to suspect the identity of the perpetrators, but they were still at the beginning. The crime was incredibly complex, and every step led to more questions. The events were reenacted over and over, and every answer seemed to take them deeper into a whirlpool of doubts. The investigators were chasing leads that might be false, but they didn't give up, waiting for each new moment that could bring them closer to the truth. While the authorities raced against time, the killers vanished into the darkness. The chase was long, and there were no solid clues leading to their whereabouts. Months passed, and the investigation began to feel like it was at a dead end. The police were putting in tremendous effort, but the killers remained in the shadows, watching from a distance. The family hoped for the day when the murderers would be caught, but justice seemed so far away. As time passed, the investigators began to find more precise biological evidence. DNA samples that had been collected began to form a new path toward identifying the killers. There was strong suspicion that the perpetrators were familiar with the area, perhaps having planned the crime in advance. Every step in the investigation opened a new window into understanding the crime, but the doubts still lingered, especially regarding the mysterious details that remained hidden. Finally, after 5 years of investigations, the day arrived when the killers were captured. With the biological evidence linking them to the crime, they were finally within the grasp of justice. The police felt a great sense of determination and victory, but the worry about future consequences loomed on the horizon. The killers, who had instilled terror for so long, were now facing justice, but could they escape again? In 2012, the trial of the killers began. The courtroom was filled with tension, and eyes were fixed on every testimony, every word spoken. Investigators testified about the evidence they had gathered, and the testimonies confirmed the involvement of the killers in the crime. The trial was full of painful details, but justice was drawing near. The family was looking forward to seeing the killers pay for their actions. Finally, the verdict was issued. The killers were found guilty of committing the crime. It was a painful moment, as everything came rushing back to the family's memory, and the pain was still present in their hearts. Justice had been served, but the shadows left by the crime could never disappear. The verdict marked the end of a long struggle, but it also signified the beginning of a new chapter for the family. The case was resolved in 2012, 5 years after the massacre, when biological evidence was used to capture the killers. The story began in 2007, and the family spent years in waiting before justice was achieved. The case was closed in Connecticut, USA, leaving behind an unforgettable tragedy. Source of the case: the Connecticut Massacre took place in Connecticut, USA, in 2007. And the case was closed in 2012 after the killers were arrested using biological evidence.